Hey everybody, welcome to the Future Church podcast with me, Anthony Delaney. We are international again. We have some national, some international guests, and I'm delighted that we've got my friend of many years, Jon Ferguson, who's joining us today from Chicago. Great to have you with us, Jon, and all the very best to you and your family. So,
Thank
how's it going where you are?
It's going great. Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, August in Chicago is a pretty good time of year. Not terribly hot. We've had some just beautiful days enjoying the sun, and we live close to the lakefront here, so try to get out there and get a run on the lakefront as often as I can. So it's a good time of year. You might not want to do that in January. Let me put it that way.
No, no, no. I came over once when it was pretty cold, but I
Mm.
don't think I've ever quite had a full Chicago winter.
You're not
So
missing
good to see you, though.
it. Good to see you too. Thank you.
So I first of all got to know your brother Dave when I was part of a learning community, and we connected there. And then around that time, I think it was around the time that the book Exponential came out, which you co-authored with Dave. I think you contributed most of the funny parts to it, but also together you trying to help churches to look at how they can multiply. I love the book Exponential. I refer back to it so often
Mm.
because it starts out with the idea of a bigger dream and the idea that you can do this, that God and you are more than enough to make a big difference for the kingdom. And to, I remember the story about. Why don't you tell us the story about the napkin together and you and Jon? And how did that work? Because that's right at the beginning of the book before he then gets into some of the practicalities about some of the how-tos.
Yeah, no, thanks, Anthony. And it is interesting because the book it's rather simple, I would say, but in some ways maybe that's why it's had a little bit of staying power. I think people pick it up, and this was sort of our dream too, is people pick it up, they read it, and they go, "Wow, if these guys can do it, I think maybe I could do it too." And then they meet us and they go, "Well, I know I can. Good grief!" But yeah, it does start with that napkin dream, and uh, you know when we started Community Christian Church, which is the church here in Chicagoland now, there was five of us on this team. There's Dave, myself, and we had two other guys that were friends and another woman who was on that team. And Dave was 25. I was 23. One of the guys on our team was 21, which that in itself, I think is a lesson. I think so easily we look at, folks in that age range, we're like, not sure if they're quite seasoned enough yet. Can they do this? And we weren't anything special. And so again, it's one of those, I hope they look at that and say, well, if they did it, especially at that age, I can too. But yeah, God gave us this dream, and it was, we were sitting in a kind of a cafe, little restaurant in central Illinois in the States here, and came up with this threefold vision. And it was really to be an impact church, which was to reach people who are far from God, but we also wanted to be the kind of church that would have an influence and impact on the local community. You've probably heard this before, but if we disappeared, we would love for the community to notice and say, wow, what happened? We were a stronger community, a better community with that church here. So to be an impact church, then to be a reproducing church, we didn't want to just be, one church in one location. We felt like we could reach more people and have a greater impact. And if we, spread out and multiplied into other communities across Chicagoland. And then finally, the third part of that vision was, if God would so bless what we're up to, we'd love to catalyze a movement. That one's the funny part to me at, 21, 23, 25, whatever we were. And there was five of us. And so talking about catalyzing a movement at that age, we often would kind of like say that under our breath, because I think it even to us at that age sounded a little bit outrageous. I think some folks might say, hey, you boys might want to just try starting a small group first. But it really was a part of our threefold vision that God gave us from the very beginning. And it's funny because we look back now, over 30 years later, and it's kind of fun just see how God has continued to help us unfold that vision. And only by the grace of God, because I mean, we had no money, no people, and really no clue, but God did what He did.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was just here the other day with my daughter Emma, who you know, and
Mhm.
we were doing some preparation for launch, which is a thing, which again you'll know we're involved with over here as well. And we
Mhm.
kind of started out of us trying to look at what exponential, could we do an exponential conversation? We called it over here. Dave came over for that, and then it's kind of become its kind of own thing in many ways. But I was looking through some old notes. I just picked up. I've got behind me a whole stack of old journals and notebooks from when I go to different things. And one of these was from way back when actually I went with Dave and went to Oscar Muriu's place in Kenya, and then came back with a dream of which they pushed me to have. I didn't even want a dream. I was kind of happy, really, getting on with what I was doing, and they were like, "How many churches do you think you could help to get started across Western Europe?" And I was like, "Well, at the moment we started about 4 or 5, so maybe go big and." 7. And then by the end of it, I came home with 500 was the number and no
Wow.
idea how to start it. And I
Yeah.
did, I put 250 down and they went sent me back like, no, go away and you must
Yeah.
try harder, must pray harder. But then there was also, I came back with all right, just pray, Lord, what? I don't know how to do this. And, really, and we got to have a big enough vision that we then come to God and say, I have no clue how we're going to do this to get him interested, I think, in helping to make it happen. But then I showed him, I said, look, I wrote this and this and this and this, various things that were just crazy dreams to go to this, to see that, to meet that person, to do all of these things. And literally tick, 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 tick. Now, they didn't all happen at once, but 80% of them
That
happen. There are all
crazy.
kinds of other things too. And it's like, wow,
Mm.
so I
Yeah.
think I would just want to encourage people to listen because I think a lot the second, well, 2/3 of the book for me, what I also love is intensely practical. This isn't just a plug for the book. I mean, it's sold plenty of copies already, but I do encourage people to get it because first of all, it's inspiring, but then it's equipping because it looks at how you can grow teams and how you apprentice. And I'd love to press into some of that later. But for you, just speaking to somebody now, either who's in the 20s and kind of wondering, could God use me? Or maybe, like myself, kind of getting into the late 50s and sort of thinking, well, you know, maybe shouldn't I just be kind of thinking, just handing over and is God kind of done with me? How do you go about getting a bigger dream? What does that kind of look like for you? Because you still want to encourage people to do that in what you're doing.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I mean, the most obvious thing, I think you got to get alone with God. And I think do some reflecting and just ask him to give you that dream. But I do think there's something powerful also in a couple things that you said, Anthony, and one of them is writing it down. Because I think that gives you an opportunity to reflect on it more and think about it and pray about it and refine it. Maybe in your case, double it. You know what I mean? You went from 250 to 500. And I know that's what Oscar kind of does to us. Like, okay, that's a good dream. Now go double it.
Yeah.
But then I think the step that may be the most vital is saying it out loud to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So once you utter that dream out loud, there's like accountability, right? Like you can't deny it. Okay, I said that I felt like God was giving me this dream. Somebody else heard it. And then they can say, well, what are you going to do about that? And so I think there's something really powerful about, praying about it, obviously, over and over, reflecting on it, asking God to confirm it, writing it down, and then sharing it with somebody else. And then
Yeah.
hopefully building a team around you so that it's not a dream that nobody can do this on their own, and you shouldn't. Okay. But I think part of saying it out loud is letting somebody else know and then bringing people into that dream to refine it and help you actually make it happen.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I remember coming back from there, and not long after it was our annual general meeting, and I really just said to everybody, I kind of apologized to the church that had signed us up for this craziness.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I don't know how we're going to do this, but we've all
Uh,
got to really pray. And
yeah.
then a couple of days later, somebody came in and they'd written a check, and it wasn't a lot, but it was a lot for them, and
Yeah.
I really appreciated it. And they just said, after that, this is what we decided. We're going to pray about it, and here's some money. It's only to be used to help that project. And it was such a confirmation for
So
me that the Lord's gonna, the Lord's in this, and we've seen that. So again, I would say that to people that people are attracted to a bigger vision than maintenance.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
just to ticking it over and all of that. And that's certainly what we've seen. And so tell us
I think
what.
there
So,
is there is something profound too in seeing people actually invest in it, whether it's their time
yeah.
or their money or their gifting, whatever that might be, because I think it confirms to you again, oh wow, okay, like I thought this is nuts, but and maybe it is somewhat, but they believe in it, so
Yeah.
maybe this could actually happen.
And
So,
maybe we in our kind of Western mindset, I don't know if that's the case, but
mhm.
I don't know. I think going to somewhere like that thing being started for me in Africa, where there's the faith to just step out, and they haven't got the resources, they haven't got all. So
uh,
literally to come back from that and say to people, we don't know how we're going to do this, is faith in a
mm,
way that sometimes as leaders, we think we've got to present the button down
yeah.
vision of how, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, then we'll do that, then we're going to hire five more people, then we'll go to that and go to that. And leaders kind of, it's the paralysis of analysis can end up locking us into something. And effectively, even there's something that invites others' help when I'll admit I don't know really how this is going to happen.
Yeah, I heard somebody say something, I can't remember the guy's name, but he said, we need to dream big, start small, and execute like crazy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
isn't that good? Because yeah, have the big dream, but
Mm,
then like, okay, what's the next step? And that's how you can start small, and
yeah.
then just continue to execute like crazy.
Mm,
That requires a team, it requires accountability, but I think it kind of breaks it down and allows you to have that big dream and feel somewhat comfortable in saying it out loud and it's somewhat comfortable in acknowledging you're not sure how it's going to get done completely, but there is a next step that we can all take together. So let's do that.
that's so good. So I think you're like pastor's kids effectively. Your dad, is it Earl? I think he's a
Yep. Yeah.
pastor. I
Good
think
memory.
yeah, I think I met him when I came over one time,
Mhm.
and he's recently retired, but he kind of effectively in some ways he's like been doing it a long time. So we was this the dream for you effectively in that sense to go into ministry? Was that always going to be the plan, or how does it tell us how because obviously you started in your 20s, so
Yeah, no, good question though. Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I was with my dad well, last Sunday. I'm on our teaching team here at Community, and so I was teaching at our first and largest location last Sunday, and Dave happened to be there with his family, and my mom and dad actually showed up. My sister was there. I can't remember the last time we were actually all at the same place at the same time, But yeah, my dad is, he's 84. My mom's 84. They're still alive, and he retired just a few years ago. He was a church planter, started a church when I was 2 years old, was at that church for 37 years. Then he came on the team at Community, led one of our locations for about another, I don't know, 17 years, I think. So effectively, he was at two different churches over the course of about 50 years. And consequently, I've only really known, for the most part, two churches my entire life. It was the church that he started that I grew up with, until I was about 18. And then we started this one at 23, and we've been with it ever since. So, yeah, I mean, growing up, it was a good experience. My folks just happen to be the kind of people that are, it's super authentic, love Jesus, passionate about the gospel. My dad's an evangelist shepherd, so he just loves people, but he's super passionate about bringing them into the fold and helping them get to know the Lord. And so, growing up, there were people finding their way back to God, as we say it, every week, and they did it old school. At the end of every Sunday morning service, there was like this, invitation hymn. We'd call it Come to Jesus. My dad would, pick up the hymnal. That was my mom's cue to get to the piano and start playing softly. And then he would say, look, today's the day of salvation. Anybody wants to give their life to the Lord, you come down the aisle right now. It's like Billy Graham, old school, right? Yeah. And people did. I mean, like almost every week. And so, you see that kind of life change, and it's transformative. You can't help it. And so, I was probably 18, something like that. Started like mulling around, what do I want to do with my life? Not really knowing for sure, but saw so much good come from that I recognized some leadership gifts, some teaching gifts, and said, Lord, I think if I could do anything, it would be some sort of leadership in the local church. And so Yeah, that's really where it came from. The only problem with having parents like mine is I have no excuse. Like, I can't blame them for anything. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. So,
yeah.
so you and Dave, you co-founded Community, and
Uh,
then subsequently from there, some churches started to be planted out in relationship, and others got connected, and then you could see God was doing a new thing, and from
mhm.
there, hey, let's call it that. This
Right.
this network, which I'm privileged to know that we're part of here at Ivy called New Thing um, began, but it started out just as how do we stay connected to some people like I think it was in Kansas City who planted out, and then from there it's grown and grown. But now you're involved in helping that really, I think, predominantly in the US.
Yeah, I'm the lead visionary for North America. Also heavily involved in what's happened in Chicagoland, and then I'm on the global team, so I get to contribute in some respects that way. But yeah, I definitely have a role, and Dave and I help kind of get that started together as well.
Yeah, so I'm definitely I love New Thing, and we've learned so much from it. And to some people listening, this will be a recap, but for other people it won't be, and other leaders. And right now people are looking for connection, which may or may not. You could be in a denomination but feel like you haven't really got any friends,
Yep.
yeah, or you haven't really got any people who get you or get
Yep.
the same drive as you have, etc. Or you could be in a network where you roll up every year and you pay your dues and your name's an affiliation or something. But new thing for me is much more than that. And it embodies this idea of embodied by the four R's. Could you just give us a little bit of a how, because obviously that didn't come out of
Sure.
nowhere. It was as you were trying to put language around what God was doing, you came up with that. But just for people who don't know about newthing.org, which they can go and check out, how does it work for people now around the world to be able to connect
Mhm.
it? But what's the rather than here's the organization, what's the driving passion?
Yeah, no, it's great question, Anthony, and I appreciate what you said already about it because that is so true. I think people are looking for connection. They're looking for people to then kind of lock arms with, whether and have a similar dream for reaching a particular region or even beyond. And I think New Thing also connects us globally now. As a matter of fact, every 2 months we have a global leadership community via Zoom. It's 7 in the morning here in Chicagoland, but I can't even imagine what time it is for other people across the globe. And it's one of those times where I'm like, oh, do I really want to get up and do that? And then every time I go, I'm just inspired by my brothers and sisters across the globe and how God is at work through them. But yeah, I mean, New Thing in a phrase is friends on mission. I mean, that's what we are. And what we find is that folks need to come together in networks in order to experience that. And I think it was Sam Stevens from the Indian Gospel League who helped us kind of understand that networks really are the backbone of movement. And in a lot of ways, you're familiar with small groups in the church. Well, networks really are to movement what small groups are to the church. And so anytime we think about like, okay, what does this need to look like next? We think about what we've learned in small groups and how they multiply and reproduce in the local church. And that's how we understand how to multiply and reproduce networks, in a local area, in a region, or even globally. And so our vision for New Thing really is to have a thriving Christ-centered church accessible to every person on the planet. And we do that as we multiply disciples, leaders, churches, networks, and movements. And so there's two pieces. We have this movement system training that helps equip churches in those ways of multiplying at every level. And then we have the networks. And if you can get into a network and experience that accountability for multiplication and together with a group of friends on mission, establish a vision for multiplying at every level, that accountability, that encouragement, and that equipping is priceless. But as you mentioned, we do have four values that we're built upon, and they're all R's, 4 R's. So the alliteration kind of helps you remember them. But relationships, we're committed to being friends on mission. Reproducing, we're committed to reproducing at every level. Resources, we're committed to sharing resources among each other. And then residents, we're committed to developing and equipping the next generation of church planters. A resident is basically like a church planter apprentice. So yeah, we're living around those 4 values. It's funny you mentioned Oscar, because I think it was 20, I don't know if this was when you were, maybe we were there together. It was like 2015, I think.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like, okay, what would it look like to do something globally where there was more collaborative work across the globe? And we'd been kind of wrestling with these 4 R's as like values that seem to work in various places. And I think it was through a fairly lengthy conversation. They were like, okay, so what does it need to be globally? And I think it was Oscar that was like, why are we rethinking this? I think these 4 R's really do seem to apply in almost any context. And I say that with all humility, but I think it's borne out that they do seem to kind of make sense. And so that's, Oscar did
Yeah.
us a favor, I think, by urging us not to reinvent the wheel and just, hey, let's go with this. I think it's going to work.
Yeah, I think they work because they interconnect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you were going through them, it also gives a little bit of a grid against you, which you kind of assess, and you sort of think, you know what, there's some things here we might be strong on, there's other things that we need some help on. And these 4 things are vital. I've realized recently through COVID, we restructured a lot here at Ivy in terms of we're a lot smaller team now. We're a lot more focused on some discipleship issues. But one of the things I thought, you know what, we used to have residents, and we've not done that for a while because we've just been in regroup. I think we stuck in an extra R. we just had to regroup and
Resuscitate maybe even in some
yeah,
cases.
yeah. So yeah, we and I thought, you know what we're gonna do? And then I thought, well, let's start with one. I know there's like one guy who I think well, in fact, he's going to be editing this podcast, so I can't say too many nice things about him, but
It might get back to him. Be careful.
yeah. But it was like, you know what? We've got to intentionally invest. And we as a church, one of the best things that's happened is a whole bunch of people who've come in as residents, some of whom have stayed at Ivy and been on staff and various things. Other people who've gone off and are now planting other churches, doing other things, working in other organizations. But we've in some way been able to be part of that journey and to, and just to bless them out into the things that God has got for them. It isn't necessarily for us a means by which you always end up with more staff team. And I think that's the kingdom value, which is another one I'd want to kind of bring in, and something that I know that is very much key to New Thing is that it's altering the question that we ask as leaders. I think what I'm talking about there. What's like the kingdom lens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the phrases that I love that you'll hear around New Thing a lot is kingdom over castle. And I think, it's so easy and tempting to get so focused on our particular castle, our local church, when there's so much more of the kingdom out there. On occasion, I'll talk about, in the States, we have Disney World, but there's a Disney in the UK, right?
No, France.
In France? Oh, okay. My bad. But one of the highlights of Disney World, like in Orlando, is the castle, and people love to see the castle when they get there, and you get captivated by the castle, right?
Yeah.
Well, the real magic though is in the kingdom. There's all this other aspects to Disney World or Disneyland, right? And I think in the same way, we get so captivated and so focused on our church, little c, when, really God wants us to be about the big church C and expand and really experience the magic of the kingdom. And I think, boy, in networks and being a part of something like New Thing, it causes you to raise your eyes up and see, man, God is at work in so many amazing ways. And we'll go through seasons. COVID was brutal and it's still hard, right? I mean, we're not, the church that we were pre-COVID and probably never will be. But I'm so encouraged by what I get to experience through other churches across the globe. and the stories that God is rewriting over and over again. That, we may be in a season, from time to time where we're not experiencing the kind of victories we'd like to see. But man, when I get together with my brothers and sisters in the networks locally, or through the global leadership community, or through stories that just get reported back to us from across the globe, then I'm reminded, okay, we are a part of something much bigger than just what's happening right here. We are a part of the kingdom, and the kingdom really is what I think God wants us to pursue together. And so, yeah, choosing kingdom over castle is a phrase that we talk about a lot.
It's so important, I think, these days as well, especially when you feel threatened and you feel like resources are few and pressures are piling on you. I mean, here's a phrase: an Englishman's home is his castle. That's what
Oh,
some people
interesting.
say over
Okay.
here. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but the idea is, I mean, and you can end up hunkering down and
Yeah.
pull up the drawbridge and let's only focus. And there's times for that. I think
Hmm.
again, we came out of COVID, and in COVID during those times, I kind of was spending a lot of time thinking, all right, well, how are we going to emerge different when we come out of here? Because
Yep.
the
Yep.
world will have changed, and I don't want to just be changed. I want us to be transforming
Yep.
so we can meet the new, whatever the new looks like. And I
Mm.
think that's it. But at the same time, I think I would have gone a little bit crazy if I'd have just focused on the plans that I had, that I thought, well, that I realized just
Yep.
went
Yep.
during the time.
Yeah. And I
Whereas
think
actually to be able to go, you know what? it, God was still in control. And some of the things that I was building that I thought were so important, actually, really, they're not.
a couple of things that you said, Anthony, a couple of things that you said that stand out to me there too. It's both in the challenging times and the good times. There's that danger, don't you think? Because in
Mm-hmm.
the challenging times, like, okay, I got to step away from, my kingdom activity, because I've got to really focus on what we're doing here, because clearly things need to take some steps forward locally. And again, you may need to shift some priorities, but I think the temptation, challenging times, is to let go of those kingdom initiatives. And I would urge people not to, because you need to be around other people when you're going through tough times. But then there's also the temptation when you're being successful, right? It's like, wow, look how great things are going here. I'm just going to like ride that wave, right? And so it's interesting. I think there's always that challenge to kind of focus on me and mine, and fail to keep our eyes on what God's doing in the kingdom. And you also mentioned the resident. I think that's a simple step, that even if it's just one resident, it's a simple step though that I think also kind
Mm.
of keeps you from being about me and mine, and keeps your eyes focused on the kingdom. Because like you said, that person may continue on your staff or may not. It may be better that they don't, because you're able to send that person and then maintain a relationship and encourage them if it's through a church plant or whatever they might be doing next. And it's another way to tie you into something that's not about me and mine, but about the kingdom and where God's at work in other places.
Yeah, I mean, one of our residents, in fact, one of our early ones was a guy you'll know as well. He's Tim Burr, and
Oh yeah.
he. I think this is something else we've got to do in terms of, like you're saying, about when you were young and you kind of took a risk on yourselves a little bit. But I think we also have to be willing I just had this sense when I met Tim that there was a call on his life. The only problem was he didn't really, and I had to tell him. I think you need to pray hard about your future. And we had a conversation. He was down in London making lots of money, working in the city and doing various things. And I was like, great, but I just feel like you should be up here in Manchester and helping learn about planting churches and how to do that. And then I mean, I sent him the new thing, like, plan of how there was an application form thing online
Hmm.
to do it.
Uh-huh. Yep.
He failed abysmally, and it was
I've,
like he
I've
came back
heard
and
that story.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was like, "Hey, it's okay. It's never going to happen." And I was like, "Oh,
He thought he was off the hook, right?
yeah, yeah." I was like, "No, maybe you're just asking the wrong questions. We'll get up here and do it." And then he turned out. I mean, as you know, Tim is a phenomenal leader. He's been all over the world since then, learning and teaching about church planting. Now, having been serving faithfully on staff here and faithfully with New Thing, together with his wife, now they're really going in for helping start new
That's so
churches,
great.
which should be micro churches all across the UK and beyond. And it's like, well, I could have tried to hold on to him, but when they came to that point, even though you love somebody, and you'd rather than be on the staff and be with you. When he said, you know what, I feel like God's calling us onto this thing, then that's my opportunity to bless.
Yes, that is so hard.
Yeah.
It's and couple things I think that you did, Anthony, that are worth mentioning. One is you had that what we call ICNU conversation.
Mm,
We talk about the four most important letters in the English alphabet are ICNU. And that's what you did. You saw something in Tim. And I think so often, maybe we don't take the time or we don't necessarily feel like, our words to someone will be that valuable. But I mean, what a life-changing moment that was when you looked him in the eye and said, Tim, I see something in you that you don't even see in yourself.
mhm,
And let me tell you what that is. And I can think of people in my own life who did the same thing. I can think of like a guy named Lyman Coleman. He's the brother of Robert Coleman, who wrote the Master Plan of Evangelism. Lyman used to do small group training and equipping all across the U.S. and I think in other parts of the world too. And I was about like 24, 25, and he kind of pulled me under his wing and said, you know what, I see in you someone who can equip and train people to lead small groups. Why don't you join this national training team as a 25-year-old? I'm sitting across the table from, I had no business being in the room, but he saw something, and it was a huge part of my own development. And so those ICNU conversations are so valuable. And
mm.
then when somebody says, yeah, I do think I want to go do something, and they're especially when they've been like a valuable part of our team. I mean, that's basically how New Thing was birthed. It was when we had a student ministry pastor come to us and say, look, I feel like God wants me to plant a church.
Mm.
And honestly, our reaction, Dave and I at the time, was like, I don't think so. we don't see in you what you see in yourself.
We don't see in you.
I know. How's that for squelching the spirit? But it was Denver, Colorado. He went to Denver, started talking to some churches, came back with, six figures of dollars committed to that church plant. It was clear God was up to something. And so, at that point, what we've discovered is you've got three options. You can try to get that person to stay with you, which it's not going to happen. I mean, they're just now telling you, they already have a for sale sign in their
They're
front
not
yard.
asking.
You can kick them to the curb and say good luck, which is probably not a real kingdom-minded way to handle it. Or you can get behind it and act like it was your idea in the first place. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. I think your gut reaction almost every time, no matter how long we've been doing this, is to hold on and to initially not want to release. But man, if you can resist that temptation, I think that's where the growth occurs, and God does some stuff that we could never do on our own.
So important, because otherwise we do end up trying to do it on our own, and we have to do it on our own because we're not equipping, we're not empowering, we're not recruiting, we're not calling other people to it. And that's one of the things, again, I know there's lots of material available for it, but I would encourage people to look at Exponential, the book, because it looks at having what you call a leadership pathway, which is really, depending on the church, it's not going to work for everybody the way in which it's exactly mapped out. You're working from your church, and
Yeah.
to give people an opportunity, I think, is what it is to
Mhm.
have a go, to
Yeah,
learn because we all only ever learn by having a go and failing and then being corrected and having a conversation. That was very much
completely.
a key part of that is we talk. As part, it is so. What how does that work in now? Well, just run us through some of that, because you got that. In fact, the ICNU conversation. I'm going to. You may or may not remember this, but I remember you came over and did a teaching with us some years ago, and you specifically taught on the ICNU conversation. And I'd had those conversations. I thought I've read the book. I thought, yeah, I know how to do these, and you realize but then you said something that I've totally stolen and told other people, and I've never credited you. I'm just letting you know that. It just
I've done the same for you, so we're
but yeah, you said that when you have those conversations with people, generally, what then the question that they're gonna ask. Do you want to take it from here? Do you know what it is?
I think what you're probably going to say is that people aren't so interested in what's in it for me. Okay, we think that, right? We want to like have this conversation. We convince them and tell them like all the benefits they're going to receive and how God's going to be at work in their life. This is going to be so awesome, and you got to do this. Here's all the blessings. But what they really want to know is why? Why me?
Yeah. Why
Why are
me?
you picking me? And I think I stole that from Andy Stanley. And apparently I didn't give him credit.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Uh,
That's
but
so
yeah,
good.
I think
That's so good.
we,
And it's so true because since I heard that, I've had it in the back of my mind. I've had those conversations and I've made sure I answer that question
yeah,
because that's the one, even though they might ask the other questions, the one they really want to know is the why me. And
why
actually,
me?
for me
Right.
to be able to say, you know what, I've been praying about
Mm,
this job in the church and or this opportunity, this new thing that's happening, and you came to mind and I've observed you and I've thought about it and I can see very and so you did this and you did that and we asked you that and you did all that. So you're answering their questions rather than just giving them the sell of the job.
exactly. Yeah. We want
Yeah.
to, we kick it into sales mode. It's like, let me show you my flip chart of all the reasons you should do this. And it's quite honestly a lot simpler than that. They just want to know why you think they could do it.
Yeah.
And I think, man, I even now talking about it, I just know I so underestimate the power of that. And
Mm.
people have, we all have such self-doubt, but man, somebody speaking into your life like that, even, you see, I think we're about the same age, Anthony, probably. But somebody even at my age, I'm a little embarrassed by how powerful an IC&U conversation still is for me.
And the fact is, I mean, there's times I look back over and people that I see in new conversations with me, and I remember having one. There's a guy called Michael Green who's very well known. He wrote a book called Evangelism in the Early Church. I
Mhm,
went on some missions with him. He was incredible Oxford
mhm.
apologist and
Yeah,
yeah, Anglican guy who just did missions and he loved seeing people come to Jesus. A bit like your dad when you talked about that. That was
yeah.
what it was all about. And I know when I was at theological college, he came over to me, sidled up to me, and he said, I've been watching you. I think, give me." And then he said, I'd love you to come next week. We've got like a week of training with me and Alistair McGrath, who's like, and you can come along to this thing. I said, I would love to, but I've got no money. I said, I'm like here as a student, I've got no money. He said, well, just come and just help out, and you tape them the talks. That's all your job is. You tape the talk,
That
and
reel to reel or cassette?
no, cassette, press record and stop. And he was like, basically, we could train a monkey to do this. He didn't say that, but and I thought,
Right,
no,
right.
I could do that. Anyway, it turned out I was the worst tape recording guy
Uh-oh.
in world history, and I got so interested in listening to them, I didn't always press record, and then I realized, and I pressed it too hard, and the thing ejected, and it was. So he really should not have seen in me the tape guy, that's for sure.
That's hilarious, man.
No, yeah, but he remained encouraging, although secretly disappointed, I'm sure. So
He probably still talks about this young guy that couldn't even press a record button if he's still around.
he's out of ministry somewhere. So,
Yeah, that's hilarious.
so we're just looping back a little bit. We talked about IC&U. We talked about having the dream. We've talked about the 4 R's. And the idea again of the castle mentality for me is, and again, I know there's leaders still, we can get into that hunker
Mhm,
down, there's rough things that are happening mentality, but you've got to move. And yet you don't just want to strike out in any direction. And we
mhm.
talked about hearing God for the bigger dream, but then there's going to be some practical steps of what that looks like. And again, new thing has developed, and it really started to kick off through conversations that were happening in COVID in a global community, which is always encouraging for me, rather than I've got to say it all just coming from a bunch of guys in North America, in conversation, in observation with others. Things have
Yeah.
come together now to bring this thing called the movement system,
Mhm.
which is helpful, really exciting. So maybe you could we just whet people's appetite and tell us a little bit about what that involves. And again, if people could check that out, where would they do that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. First of all, newthing.org for sure. And you can find out much more about the movement system. And the movement system, and you mentioned the leadership pathway. In some ways, it follows that leadership pathway too. And the whole idea behind that is we set up cohorts. A lot of them are available online via Zoom, and at times that I think would be workable for folks across the globe. And we do some of them in person as well. And we're also equipping people in different parts of the world to actually, lead those movement system cohorts themselves. But it starts with, multiplying disciples. What does it look like for you to have a disciple-making culture in your church? And I know that's something you've spent a lot of time working on, Anthony, there at Ivy and influencing other churches as well. But we know we got to start at the micro. If we want to multiply, churches, networks, and movements, then we have to be multiplying disciples and leaders in churches. And so we start by multiplying disciples. There's a cohort for that. Then multiplying leaders. What does it look like for you to have a leader developing, leader multiplying culture in your church? How do you identify and develop apprentices, and make that a part of your culture and kind of walk through that 5 steps of apprenticeship? I do, you help, we talk. I do, you, I watch you. You kind of go through those 5 steps that I always get confused in my head as I try to repeat it. But I think we're aware of those 5 steps. And then a multiplying church cohort as well. What does it look like for you to, multiply churches and see opportunities for churches to be reproduced, whether it's, micro, macro, multi-site, mega. I mean, we need churches of all shapes and sizes to be multiplying. And then there's the reproducing network catalyst, and then there's the reproducing movement catalyst. And so there's 5 different catalysts that kind of make up the movement system. And we make that training and equipping available to as many people as we possibly can, and feel like that training and equipping combined with being in a network, being with friends on mission right now is sort of like the 1-2 punch that seems to be really encouraging more and more multiplication and movement, both here in the States and all over the globe.
Mm. Fantastic. I just asked this question recently of another leader on the podcast, but it strikes me that again we're living in times of uncertainty, times of chaos. You had that sense of call when you're late teens into your early 20s. Maybe somebody's listening to this now, at whatever stage they're at in life, and they're wondering about could it be God could use me, could call me? And I mean, I know that let's get out of the way that this isn't necessarily like to be only just we're just talking about vocational ministry. Is I think I do want to lean into that a little bit because I do believe we still have a place for that. I love micro church. I love that all of those, and I know that new things heavily connected into things like the Kansas City Underground where people are bivocational. So there's all that kind of thing. But it could also be that somebody feels a sense of I'm going to go all in on this, or they're wondering and wrestling with that. What advice would you give to somebody to test a call, in a sense, to ministry, which is going to maybe involve them? They could go off and be a doctor. They could go off and do great things in the kingdom as well. But maybe somebody's listening to this and just wrestling with the idea of just I don't know what it looks like, but you can't get away from this sense of a dream that would be whatever all in looks like. How do you test that?
No, that's good. It's funny because Lisa, my wife, and we had a couple over here for dinner last night. And, we live in the north side of Chicago in the city. And this guy's he's 27, I think, and just finished at Moody Bible Institute, looking to go to Wheaton for grad school, and has a part-time role in a local church here. And he's in that moment, I think, Anthony, where he's just still trying to kind of assess his call or confirm his call. And it was just interesting hearing him talk, because there's some things about, ministry that he loves. And there's some things about, and when I say ministry full time, like you're talking about vocational ministry, that vocational call, that he just is sensing that maybe he doesn't like. And I think trying to figure out like which aspects of that really are going to always be a part of it, which are not. And I encouraged him, that it's good to be wrestling with that. You kind of have to continue to work out that call and just continue to ask God, what it might look like for you personally. How has he wired you up and gifted you to lead in maybe a unique and different way? Try not to feel boxed in by any particular way. How you express it at the end of the day may be wildly different. I mean, for example, so often I think, in a more traditional setting, we think that a vocational call to ministry means, well, now I'm going to be, leading a church in a particular location, and I'll be, preaching every week. Well, if that's honestly what it meant to lead vocationally in ministry, I probably wouldn't have done it and wouldn't want to. I'm probably more on the apostolic side of leading and teaching side to a certain degree, but I don't want to teach every week. And I certainly don't want to have to sit in an office, for 20 to 25 hours a week, creating the content for that talk on my own every week. And so at Community, I teach once or twice a month. We have a team of people that work on that content together. And so, okay, we were able to kind of create that idea and that approach to it so that it made opportunity, I think, for more people to kind of live out their calling. And so I guess I would encourage, just don't feel like it has to be what you've seen or a certain way. It could look a lot of different ways. And then I go back to the whole apprenticeship too. I think, find somebody that you can walk alongside, you kind of dip your toes in with, that will equip you and help you kind of wrestle with some of the things that you're thinking about as you consider that calling into vocational ministry. And don't try to figure it out on your own, and ask questions and get some reps, try different things under the leadership of somebody else that's a little bit more experienced, where you can fail and it's okay. And and then seek honest, direct feedback. And I would also just say, as you mentioned, there's so many different forms of church right now, but man, there's still a desperate need for people to give their life to what I would say full-time, ministry. And so that's a high calling in some ways, but it's also, I think, something that we need more and more of. And so I still get excited when I talk to people that say, yeah, I want to be a full-time ministry. And so I could encourage them.
Yeah, I remember a while ago. I mean, one of the values, again, a new thing, and it's something Dave wrote about in his book with Alan Hirsch, On the Edges, on the Verge. It was the idea of ordaining everybody effectively to go and do something for God, we've had opportunities to do that at Ivy, and we found so many people that are waiting for somebody to bless them into the thing that God is already calling them into. In many ways, they're often already doing, but they didn't know it was ministry even. They're just like, I'm doing this for Jesus. So we've had that. At the same time, on occasion, I really felt to do the call and to say, you know what, might be some people here, and you could run off and do all kinds of other stuff and it still be, but you can't get away from the sense that that God wants. And the interesting thing I would say to that person, if there's anybody listening and wrestling with that, is I can think of a number of them where we've had people come forward and even get on their knees at the front and offer themselves, similarly sometimes to an exponential moment or something we do. And guess what? It doesn't work out necessarily for that person anything like what they thought it would.
Yeah.
God was just looking for them to lay down. God was just looking for them to be
right
and to surrender. And from that place, he'll move you into. So I'm thinking of a guy in particular. I'd not long done the wedding for this couple, I think, and they both came forwards, and I was a little bit like, wow, you guys just need to be married a while before you go and throw yourself into this. But he came on board. He helped to lead he grew out one of our congregations. He's fantastic. He's then really got into the kind of the movement stuff, apprentice with Steve Addison, and now he and his wife, they're off in the Middle East, and they've gone and planted out from here in this place I'm not even going to talk about, and doing those kind of things. But it started with a willing heart, somebody willing to lay it down. So as we wrap up,
that's so good.
Is there anything that you want to bring to us, or just conclude with? But I'd really love you to pray as well for us, that we certainly for me, we'd have that laid down life, that willing heart that the Lord could.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would just piggyback off of what you're saying right there, Anthony, and that is, if you choose, and I don't know if vocational ministry is the right phrase, but I think we know what I'm talking about. That, and you follow that calling, no matter what, we got to remember that, I mean, our calling is to equip the saints, right? We're not supposed to do it all ourselves anyway. That's a dead end. And we've been, practicing that play for too long, and that's just not getting it done. And so, whether, you are in that position of leadership and, you have a full-time calling or not, It's about equipping the saints. It's about the priesthood of all believers, everybody being out there practicing the way of Jesus wherever they go and whatever they do. And the more all of us are focused on that, I think at the end of the day, that's where we're going to see, the return. We've all got to be out there blessing people, the way Jesus blessed people. And that's where I think we're going to see movement and God do what, in our lifetime, what we've never seen before. So, yeah.
Amen. Brilliant. Jon, could I ask you to pray for everybody? If you're driving, don't close your eyes.
Right on.
If you're operating heavy machinery, put it down.
Exactly. I'd be glad to, Anthony. Thanks. This has been a great time. It's been so fun to be with you. Thanks for asking. Let's pray.
Yeah.
Father God, we're truly honored and blessed by you, thankful, grateful for how you use people like us that have doubts, questions, feel completely ill-equipped, but you work through us through your Holy Spirit's guidance to transform lives and to see just miraculous life change. God, thank you for Anthony. Thank you for Ivy. Thank you for Launch. God, thank you that we're able to pursue the kingdom over castle together. God bless what he's up to and his life and family and ministry and leadership, Lord. And we just ask, Lord, if there's ways that you want to work that we're not seeing, Lord, redirect our paths. Lord, help us to remain open to you and just keep your mission in mind every step we take. We love you, Father. Thank you for Jesus. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks so much, Jon. So we'll put some links, really, but if you check out what's the community church's website?
Communitychristian.org
And
is
we
probably the best
mentioned
place.
newthing.org. You can get
Yep.
lots on there for people to connect to. But please, if you've enjoyed this, like and subscribe and tell all your friends so we can get more people hearing the Future Church podcasts in the future. But God bless you, and thank you very much, Jon Ferguson, for being our guest today.
Great to be